Okay. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our first FinTech Friday session of 2024. My name is Karyl, and we have an amazing panel of experts with us today for what is going to be a wonderful discussion. So before we start, just a kind reminder to keep your microphones on mute, preferably videos off unless you're the speakers, so that we minimize bandwidth. And please rename yourselves to make sure that your name is clearly stated, as well as institution, so that when you do ask questions, we know how to refer to you. And without further ado, I'm going to kick off the session. So globally, women represent a massive unserved and underserved segment of the population by financial services providers. With more than 1.7 trillion in unmet demand for credit among women formal MSMEs in developing markets, and more than 700 million women with no access to a bank account, we have a very long way to go before we reach financial inclusion. AI, on the other hand, has taken the world by storm, impacting almost every industry and has become a key part of our everyday lives. Its core capabilities make it a potential game changer for the financial services sector. From chatbots to personalized financial education to alternative credit scoring, AI may be the long-awaited solution to boost financial inclusion. The objective of today's session is to understand if and how AI can be leveraged to support women clients, in particular women entrepreneurs, and bridge the gender gap in access to finance globally. We will hear firsthand from fintechs that implement AI in their solutions to enable higher volumes, more secure transactions, and better reach to unserved and underserved customers. So to do that, please welcome our amazing panel of speakers. Right now, listed simply in alphabetical order, Aditi, Sholapurkar, co-founder of Salt, Gordon Peters, co-founder and CEO of Boost Capital, Kelly Uphoff, Chief Technology Officer at Tala, and Viola Llewellyn, founder of the Tulle-Box. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask each one of my speakers to, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. There you go, because we want to see you. I'm going to ask each of my speakers in the order, 1 second, sorry. It believes I am speaking Spanish. No, English. Thank you. Sorry. I may sound not perfect. So I'm going to ask each one of you in the order in which I introduce you to maybe very quickly introduce yourself and your company, and then we're going to kick the session off. Aditi?
Hi, and I have to tell you, you do sound perfect. Lovely to meet everyone. I'm Aditi. I am one of the 3 co-founders of a company called Salt. We're focused on bridging the gender gap in finance. We're India-based. We're very happy to be probably the only tech platform in the whole of India and maybe in the world which allows men and is still dominated 70 to 80% by women in the fintech space. As a company, also, we're literally 50-50 when it comes to men and women, and very happy to be here with everyone.
Perfect. Gordon?
Hi there, Gordon Peters, co-founder of Boost Capital. My co-founder Lucinda is currently on a plane right now, otherwise she'd be joining as well. Boost is a white-labeled tech platform that onboards loans customers and savings customers on chat platforms. So on Facebook Messenger, on WhatsApp, on Telegram, we essentially built the entire tech stack to help customers come through where they already are using technology they're already using. And so that's a quick background on Boost.
Thank you. Kelly?
Hi, everyone. Kelly Uphoff, Chief Technology and Product Officer for Tala. Super happy to be here. So Tala is a financial services fintech. We provide credit and other financial services to what we call the global majority, those who are traditionally shut out of the banking sector. And we've been using AI since the beginning. That's the reason that Tala exists. I'm sure I'll talk more about that, but super excited to be here.
Perfect. And last but by no means least, Viola. You're on mute.
a cardinal sin, isn't it? Good morning. Sorry about that all. I'm Viola Llewellyn. I was previously the co-founder and president of Avamba, which was an alternative trade and finance solution for emerging markets, one of the first companies to blend culture at the nexus of non-interest bearing finance as a way to drive SME funding, financing, especially for women. I'm now the co-founder and manifestor in chief of the Tulle-Box, which is everything I learned in the previous business to help women arrive aware, prepared, and ready. And of course, that involves a little bit of your ka-ching finances, especially financial literacy. Great to be here.
Perfect. And there we go. So let's get the show on the road. So in order to kind of frame the context a bit, I'm going to start with you, Kelly. What are the main technologies and applications of AI? What innovations and functionalities does it bring to the equation?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it somewhat high level because I think maybe that would be many hours. And actually, I'm at Tala now. I came from Netflix. My background is actually data science, machine learning. So it's nice to be able to blend these things together. So AI is, the way it's currently being used, it's very much an umbrella term to mean a couple things. And it's sort of, as the zeitgeist grows, gets broader and broader as an umbrella term, which is totally okay. Although some of the nerds in the space may cringe at how many things are encapsulated in this term at this point. But you can think of it, at its most pure, generating new intelligence, machines generating new intelligence. You can also think about use cases or technologies where AI is replicating human intelligence, but at a scale and a power that, it would be incredibly inefficient or impossible for humans to do, like ChatGPT, large language models, that's replicating human intelligence, but at an intense, massive scale. At Tala, we're doing some exploratory work with LLMs and ChatGPT, but we also are doubling down on machine learning and big data, which is also, I think, currently included in this umbrella term of AI. So I would just stop there. That's kind of how I sort of think about it in my head, but happy, in the Q&A to go a little deeper.
Perfect. And if at any point, any of you wants to jump in on a question and add your opinion, please feel free to do that. Just raise a hand or unmute yourself. But with that, Gordon, I want to turn to you. So hearing what we just heard from, Kelly, Kelly, I might call you Tala once in a while. I really apologize. I'm trying to control myself.
Well, I'm not helping you with my sweatshirt that has a very prominent. That's okay.
No worries. So Gordon, how can AI then be applied by financial services providers? Would it be different, let's say, if it were a bank versus a fintech?
Yeah, I mean, I think great question. I think that my initial thinking of that was like broadly the same. I think that there's tools that are in the AI umbrella now, as Kelly said, that are in various places. ChatGPT is sort of taking the world by storm. So a lot of people are thinking that AI is that. We've been working similarly in AI for the last 5 years and in chatbots much before they're famous. So I think that like my mind immediately goes to chat because that's what's in the news. But banks have been using big data, machine learning for a long time for processing of data, for insights, for security, for privacy, a number of different things, and all things that are like pretty useful for banks to do faster and more agile. I think that the biggest difference that I look at when we talk to fintechs versus bank clients of ours is that fintechs move faster. They're willing to like get a pilot up and running in say 1 to 3 months, whereas a bank has a longer procurement cycle. They're more worried about security. They're more worried about the regulator. And so I think that there's different applications that go through fintechs faster, but a lot of the same things are being used. A lot of the same technologies of faster eKYC, faster credit scoring, faster analysis of customers on the way in, and then faster analysis of customers in the repairs and par ratios and things like that. So I think that broadly the same, but some differences in the application and speed of delivery between the two.
Okay, perfect. So Viola, in your former journey with Avamba, AI was a key part of your business. So can you tell us maybe about your experience with AI and how it helped you serve women clients better?
Well, being focused on the African market, I was very loath to embrace AI just because everybody else was doing it. I'm sure many of you who have been in this industry for more than a decade, as I have, know that it's very easy to be toppled over by the knee-jerk reaction to what's trendy and what's excellent. But for us, I wanted to hold back because there is a nexus of culture, finance, and the realities of women, not what people tell you. You have to investigate that. Your best AI products are only as good as the inputs. So if from the very beginning, if you're operating in an area where there is a digital divide or an incorrect collection of data, you can easily misinform that. When I did get on board with the use of AI, it was in partnership with Microsoft. And that was a good 8 years ago, where we created a natural language chatbot in African dialects. It was very clear to us that AI could accelerate the understanding of how people speak about finances, which they do much better in casual language versus anything that sounds like an MBA. So it was quite funny when dealing with investors who want to know which of the big accounting firms do your businesses use. This is ridiculous. But the use of AI and keeping a human in the loop process was the approach that I took, incremental testing, making sure that we actually spoke to people, tested it, used an A/B testing process. So that's how we used AI to begin with. It informed every algorithm around inventory. So we were very different from other people, using trade, looking for those cultural groups who had a history in it was how we began to enable AI.
Perfect. Aditi, I want to turn to you now. So Salt is an AI-powered fintech platform that transforms how women consume financial services. So maybe can you share how you have integrated AI in the design and delivery of your services?
I always tell people very honestly that, when we started out, we didn't set out to be an AI company. We stumbled into being one because, like I said, right, we were solving for women. We were solving for women in a market like India, which has produced some fantastic fintech offerings. And yet, less than 2% of their consumer base is women, right? So clearly something was wrong, and yet no one was bothering to sort of figure out what that was. And very surprisingly, and I know there's so much conversation about, the inherent bias in AI and, the data that informs its inputs, but strangely, that was our biggest tool. So when we started out, and as Viola said, it is so important to start with the human being. We used to have almost hour-long conversations with women, and those conversations were so cathartic because for most of those women, and they were, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, sometimes it was the first time they were talking about money to someone. And it had such a deep emotional reach, and we were like, okay, this is amazing, but we cannot do this for every single person. So how do we replicate it? So the first thing we built was a sentiment analyzer. And what that basically did was, take natural language and be context intelligent about it. So for example, if a woman says, my mother made the 4-figure financial decisions and my father made the 5-figure financial decisions, this is an INR, the context intelligence informed the model that this was actually a negative statement and not a neutral statement because, it showed her mother's disempowerment. Or if someone says, I was happy to be able to scrape together and afford school fees, instead of focusing on the word happy, you focus on the entire sentence. And what this helped us do is really figure out that when women spoke about money, it was always about themes related to identity. And when men spoke about money, it was typically around themes related to actions and what you could do with that money. And that informed what was going to be the basis of our entire product building journey. So for example, our first sort of offering, and this went viral and suddenly people had a vocabulary to talk about money, was a psychometric. And again, that was built around Euclidean clustering of really 5 core personality traits. So, machine learning, essentially, right? How does a model understand, 250,000 people, and instead of just segregating them based on arithmetic means, segregates them based on a cluster of human characteristics, very simply, right? And from that point onwards, because we realized that, look, this was always going to be about trust before sophistication. So, you have to solve for trust before you solve for automation. Everything right from our expense tracker to so we have a Q&A based sort of investment tool that helps you figure out where you should put your money. Every single thing was natural language based from that point onwards, because we realized that when a woman says, or anyone for that matter says, repaid my loan, and puts a happy emoji next to it, the sentiment score on that is almost as valuable as what she's telling you, which is that she repaid something. And yeah, that's kind of what we did.
Very nice. Kelly, so hearing, all of these, maybe you can help us really understand the basics of the AI and how it can help accelerate financial inclusion. I mean, we are hearing a lot about the chatbot, but I'm sure there are very different components as well, which are probably integrated at Tala. So how can AI in general accelerate financial inclusion, and in particular for women?
Yeah, it's great. And I'll kind of piggyback on what Gordon said. Is everyone's talking about like chat and it's amazing, right? Like that's so powerful. Or a lot of folks are talking about that. But again, bringing back like good old machine learning, right? Where there's still so much power there and big data. I think that like, again, I'll talk about the Tala origin story of our founder, Shivani, who it sounds very similar to a lot of the other panelists, where she was seeing this big global problem where, folks in emerging markets, they're shut out of access to credit. Legacy institutions don't want to work with them. And there's just no history, like there's no data and there's no, traditional data, right? And so she, at the time, was working for the UN Population Fund, and she was sitting with people at their fruit stand. She was sitting with women at their lending circle, and she was just observing over a long period of time how they interacted, what they were doing. And she realized, okay, the way to democratize things is data from smartphones, right? Because the reality is you still need something at scale to solve a problem that is at the scale. Sorry, I'm talking about my biography too much, but it's just, Tala is such a full circle moment for me, because I started my career actually in the Peace Corps, and I was trying to help people get credit through grants and applying for a grant. This woman, here's a grant. And I probably helped 20 people in 2 years, right? And so the scale at which big data, machine learning, AI, the number of people that you can serve and how you can learn from a large pool of people, so that the next person that comes in, you can help them even if they have incomplete information. You can take that, we say we take the first risk, right? We take the first leap. And so data really allows you to do that. So again, at Tala, we're taking data from the smartphone, like for example, like how many other lending apps do they have? We're taking data from how they interact with us when they first download the app. And there's a lot of powerful signals in there that, again, allow us to take that first risk. And maybe we're starting with a lower amount and then we're laddering them up quickly over time. That's personalization. That's another powerful thing. We've built data infrastructure so we can sort of process things almost in real time. So as they repay their loan, we immediately can serve them, quickly. A lot of the people that we serve, they are women. In some of our markets, the majority of our customers are women, and their needs are often like emergencies. And so you need that data feedback loop to work really quickly. So again, I want to just talk about AI, but I want to talk about data engineering, machine learning, big data. Those are all things that have to come together to solve this at scale. And that's what we're doing at Tala.
Amazing. And I want to turn to you, Gordon, on that. Is what does then AI mean for the consumer of financial services, right? From a receiver perspective, what are some of the direct applications that AI will have for the end user?
Yeah, I mean, I think piggybacking on what Kelly just said, like the promise of AI is faster responsiveness. Like I think that one thing that we like often talk about with banks and fintechs that we work with is, banking for a long time was location based. It was in-person transactions in bank branches. Then came around agent banking, so that agents were going out. And then the first wave of banking was digitalization, so that you could do banking real time wherever you are. And I think the promise of AI is real-time personalized loan products, as Kelly just said. So as the consumer is interacting with you, you're able to do real-time loan products, real-time fraud detection. It's increased convenience, increased accessibility. For partners that we work with, we have like a surprisingly high sticky rate of people who take a loan powered by Boost white label technology. All of our tech is white labeled, so we work with banks, but it's all branded to them. It's their products, it's their decisioning. And 99% of customers that go through Boost say my next loan will be digital. That's super high and super sticky. And it just is the convenience factor. It's the speed of transaction of being able to talk to a consumer on a Tuesday night at 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. and make a decision such that you can do that faster. So I think it's more targeted to consumers, faster turnaround, and then financial management tools that are sort of democratized now. Like you're able to find financial literacy, financial education things that are there, and those can be signals or they can be marketing channels or both. So I think that like you've got a lot of offerings that are there. I also want to point out that I think that we're still like, although all of us I think have been working it for quite a while, we're really at the beginning of this cycle, right? Like internet cycle number one, phone mobile was cycle number two. Like AI certainly feels like it's cycle number three, and I think that we're seeing the edges of where it is. But like big data and banks has been there for a while, and I think it's going to get more and more fun and more interesting as it goes.
Amazing. And with all of that new technology and everything that's working towards the positive, Viola, is there a risk of AI not being done right? I mean, what is a potential, I don't want to say the word danger, maybe it's too scary, but it probably is. Is there any a gray zone that we're not aware of or that we should be expecting with AI? You're on mute, Viola.
I was going to say the crass answer to that is any innovation that comes out today can easily be misappropriated by bad actors. So I think it's very important to make sure that the guardrails, both from a legislative perspective, criminal and otherwise, when we were working with it in Cameroon, we had to self-police. And one of the other dangers was the lack of understanding within the banking arena of those people who look at this and just don't have enough information. I found it was very useful to provide an advocate to privately and quietly teach bankers, what does this really mean? There's also the inability for those who don't have enough financial literacy to not know how to take responsibility for themselves. So in our case, we were always trying to provide a literacy angle to what we were doing. And we were applying the use of large language models, and as you quite rightly said, machine learning is still under discussed as a way in which to try to create safe harbors for those people using our technology and what we were teaching to other people. I'm also very afraid, especially when it comes to women, the digital divide is still to be addressed. If you don't even have basic things like digitized systems in and around those industries that touch banking, the bleed out that I have witnessed in some of these emerging markets where there's no one to correct it can take a long time to pull back from. So you don't want to have people being categorized into areas that just don't have enough data points to give a truthful picture, because you end up building on a platform that is quite inappropriate. Those are my concerns.
Yes, and I actually want to build on that and about machine learning in my next question to Aditi specifically, is that, the key component we kept talking about is that machine learning is a key part of AI. And given that the existing data today is, well, not perfect, we run the risk of really having a very biased machine learning process today. So how can we ensure that we design AI and machine learning to counter this risk and actually support us in becoming inclusive rather than maintain the exclusiveness of the situation?
No, that's actually a fantastic point. And in my examples that I mentioned where tools within the framework of AI actually helped us, right, get over a lot of the biases that were already very deep-rooted. We saw that firsthand, that there is no alternative to training the biases out of the data in a way, right? So for example, like I mentioned, in our sentiment analyzer was trained on close to 10,000 transcripts of hour-long interviews with women and men, and it still needed a lot of human effort to correct it and tweak it and figure out where something had been misunderstood or misappropriated, right? Or it thinks I'm speaking in Spanish as well. There's a bias right there. But Right. Similarly, something that always happens in financial services, for example, is women are risk averse, right? And I feel like I will die on that hill, talking about how they aren't. But the way to correct a bias like that is to introduce a positive bias. So, for example, with our psychometric, we were able to figure out how people as a population fall on a few things, right? Like anxiety, intuition, precautionary saving, free spending, propensity for financial decision making, without a gender lens. And so when our investment board or any of those flows throw out recommendations, we actually ask you that, hey, do you want me to let your psychometric influence that? So, if you're going to change a recommendation on where I should invest, don't change it based on the fact that I'm a woman. Maybe change it based on the fact that I'm a high anxiety cohort or I'm a low intuition cohort or so on and so forth, right? So you actively have to set up systems to counterbalance those biases or include, I shouldn't even say biases, or influences that might be more correct, right? In our learning itself, we realized that if you look at, and these were, like I said, 250,000 responses, men and women did not score meaningfully different on, for example, comfort with financial terminology, but women scored significantly lower on willingness to join financial conversations, right? So clearly, this isn't an internal issue; it's an issue of their environment. And when you take the time and the effort to very simply clean up your data, clean up your models, magic happens. In the early days of, ChatGPT, if you asked it, you're a woman and you have $1,000 to spend, what are you spending it on? Or a person earns 10% more than their peers, are they more likely to be a man or a woman? You would find extremely sexist answers. The person earning 10% more was always a man, and a woman given $1,000 to spend was always, shopping and buying shoes and clothes and things like that. Fortunately, because of all the uproar, GPT's done a great job of cleaning all of those things up. But when we trained our models on people's spending patterns, people's sentiment patterns on what they spend, our learning was actually that surprisingly in our base, right, women were on an average out earning men by 5 to 10%, and women were not spending only on clothes and shoes. And by the way, that is absolutely fabulous if they are. Women were spending on things like pet care, healthcare, personal development, skill development, right? So it's not to say that how can artificial intelligence ruin our society? It can, like 9 ways to Sunday. How do we use something that's a great tool? And I'm going to borrow Kelly's terminology here of replicating human intelligence. And when I say intelligence, I mean judgment, discernment. At scale, you have to help it do that correctly. And that's where the human really comes in.
Amazing. Thank you for that, Aditi. And well, Kelly, I want to talk about, I mean, this was something that was somewhat, mentioned in one way or another. So a key factor for access to finance to underserved population is infrastructure. So with AI and all these machine learning and all of the technological convenience that we want to use in order to support financial inclusion, is AI going to be bothered by infrastructural limitations that we may have to a lot of the underserved population, with the underserved population?
Yeah, I'll give a very techie answer and then maybe someone else can fill it in a little bit. I think that again, when you say, when we say AI, we mean a lot of different things. Let's like talk about the hot thing of these LLMs and that sort of like replicating human intelligence. AI, obviously the compute power you need for that is massive. It would be prohibitive for people to try to do a lot of things internally, but there's, a plethora of, OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, partnering with AWS, Microsoft. And that is, for us using OpenAI and AWS, it allows us to leverage that sort of technology without having to spend money that we don't have, that we would rather spend on our customers, right? Giving them access to credit, et cetera. That said, what it requires then is to be extra careful about data privacy and data security. And I think that's going to be where organizations trying to leverage this stuff and start like keeping up with it, making sure that data privacy and security is not an afterthought. So, building the kind of infrastructure where if you're leveraging these tools, you're not sending out sensitive private data, and making sure that your compliance program covers these things too. Again, it's fun to just explore and people are so excited and engineers just trying different things, but hey, that's actually customer data, right? And so I think the infrastructure around that is going to be really key. And then also just going back to thinking about the machine learning use cases, thinking about your data engineering infrastructure, there's, and I won't use the bad word of it, but it's like not good data in, bad information out, right? And so just really tending to the data engineering side of things, which is like not necessarily the hot, sexy part of this, but is so key. So I think that's also an investment that people have to make. And so are those things prohibitive? To large organizations? No. To startups that have a really amazing, incredible idea, but maybe not the resources to tend to those things, it's just something that hopefully, like white label platforms and other types of services can join up with these innovators and make it possible for all the ideas to flourish. I would hate for only the big players who already have the compute power and already have the infrastructure to be the only ones that could innovate in this space.
Yeah, definitely. And then if we want to reverse it and look at the other side of the coin, Gordon, with you, is what would there be infrastructural limitations to the end user being able to access and use all of these tech-powered convenient solutions? If we have a limitation on how many people have access to smartphones, we know there's still a gap there, and we know that women are on the negative side of that gap. So, if we want to really reach financial inclusion and we really want to serve this population, what kind of limitations are we still going to be facing, even with AI and all of the solutions it brings, because of infrastructural limitations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're right. That's a great point. There are real limitations that are there for connectivity, for access to smartphones. There's workarounds in some cases. Like we work with a lot of bank partners that will say like, hey, 20% of my customers currently have smartphones. And then we double click in and dig a little bit deeper and say, all right, that's ownership of smartphones, but what about access to one in the family? And I think that there is the ability to like do shared resources for some of those that can enable access to go a little bit wider. But I think it's a real consideration. So I mean, you're looking at telco networks that are your internet providers typically in a lot of emerging markets, and then you're looking at smartphones being available. Usually, secondary markets need to be flourishing for access to really go wide, and we've got a lot of variation. One market that we work in the Philippines has over 100% connectivity per population. So the connectivity is very high, but it's 7,000 islands, and that's not distributed evenly across the country. Another country that we work in has a much lower percentage of population that's on smartphone. And so consistently we get requested from banks of, can you do this on a feature phone instead of a smartphone? So I think that there's considerations that are going to need to go into like your tech providers and your infrastructure providers that are there. And I think that being thoughtful about that is going to be useful as we kind of take it on, but it's a hard problem. It's not a simple one to figure out.
Yeah, definitely. So I just wanted to turn to the audience and say, at any point, you can simply drop in a question in the chat to any of our experts, and we would love to take them on. So, Viola, I wanted to turn to you and talk about your new endeavor, the Toolbox, or the Tulle-Box, if I'm saying it correctly. So how do you see AI playing a role in the design and application of the Toolbox in the
I
future?
actually don't. And here's the reason why. Having transitioned from a purely digitally driven endeavor for the last 10, 11 years, a lot of things have begun to occur to me. I am betting on the fact that within most human systems, including the Industrial Revolution, we start zooming towards innovation and what it's going to do for the blanket level of humanity. But at some point, there is often a feature where people start to want to rely on something that is human. Take, for example, if you go into a restaurant and you hear hand cut, human crafted. So I think that there will still be space within what we do with the Toolbox to be able to take those people who are afraid or not sure of the veracity or the honesty of something and say, this human in the loop endeavor, or this is sincerely crafted, created by a human being. I think there'll still be some value for that. But for the Toolbox, AI, I think as the community of people that we're curating, I know that I will use it for a little bit of product development, understanding, even trying to pass the different areas of our data repository, looking for synergistic patterns in order to develop more ways to affect the psychology of leadership. The reason I feel this way is when we were using it at Ovamba in Cameroon specifically, all of our focus shifted to using AI to understand inventory and then the humans on a secondary basis. And there were many reasons for that. But I have noticed there is a bias in even my own sense of creation, that because I'm always interested in the real biological, organistic area of humanity, I sometimes don't always even trust my use of AI. So I think that I would want people to police me. I know that I would always be leaning towards just how do we collect data from human beings first, be sure that it's correct, that it has altruistic positive impact before hard coding it in that permanence into systems. So that's where I'm coming from. The Toolbox will not be leading with that right off. It will be definitely an application on a secondary basis.
Just to jump in, Viola,
Yes, please, go ahead.
You said a couple times that human in the loop, and I think the founder stories of both Aditi and Kelly for the organizations involved heavy human in the loop.
Yes.
I think that for what we see, it's unavoidable. Like, we work with big commercial banks, small microfinance banks, small rural banks, and I think right when we started our business, the number of customers that requested human customer service was so large that we have, like, each of our partners at launches has a human customer service team that will answer chat questions, phone questions, video questions. And we just found that, like, when somebody's transitioning from like old school banking or financial services to a new version, sometimes they need like chatter on the beginning, on the way in. For your second, third, 25th cycle loan, you don't necessarily need that. But we really found that human in the loop is a massive, big thing. And also, like, even interestingly nuanced, some small loans don't necessarily require it. But when somebody gets to like $1,000 collateralized loan or $2,000 collateralized loan, the bank really wants to have human in the loop. So both customer side and the financial institution side have needs that are human in the loop things. I think that is one of the answers around some AI bias. Like, there is human decision making that gets in there. Now, there are problems as well with that. But I do think that it's an interesting feature of kind of what we're all talking about in the founder stories of organizations.
I totally agree with you. We actually sent people around Cameroon, especially 262 tribes, distinct language and all sorts of different cultural things. It was a brilliant petri dish of untapped data that people had never taken a look at. AI allowed our portfolios to go from bank level defaults, which are close to 40% in some regions, down to less than 5%. And when people asked us, how on earth did you achieve this? It was, we took the focus off the human being and used AI to understand the behavior around inventory, the buying, the selling, seasonality, gender especially. When you look at women, the beauty of AI is that in many developing regions, women are on the thin edge of the wedge. The closer you are to where people are physically pulling things out of the ground, the less application there is around them and more around their activity. By the time you get upstream, where men have taken over mechanization, monetization, distribution, export, and the business decisions around the item that women pulled out of the ground, that's when you start to see a divide. And I always felt AI can close that, but only if it is used to help women jump from that thin end of the wedge as quickly as possible. So if you don't blend it into everyday learning and you don't change academic curriculum to have this as a natural embed for people to think that way, then you start to get large groups of populations who are a little bit misaligned and will have a bias themselves towards it. So it's a very fascinating area, and having a human there, we used it even with our own staff, that sentiment. We were always able to figure out, is this individual processing this because this individual who's applied is from the same tribe? There were too many data points for them to figure that out. So we had to watch everybody working, and we crammed a lot of that into our own internal AI for the processes of transactions. I'll stop there.
Perfect. So we have a question from Omoneka, who is asking our speakers if they can share more practical examples of products that they have that actually leverage AI. So I'm going to ask Aditi and then maybe Kelly to chime in on that. So Aditi, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've, shared quite a few, but let me share another one, right? There's always this conversation around data privacy, data security. Are people going to be, willing to share their data with you? And it's such a cultural nuance, right? Because I used to live in Hong Kong for the longest time, and so it was very strange for me to see how, for example, in China, the whole, no one is very afraid of sharing their data, to be honest. And the way people share with apps and super apps versus, let's say, a place like Singapore, where I currently live, where it's relatively a little more conservative. And, in India, for example, where there is such a strong disparity in terms of, economics and empowerment, again, it's very, very binary, right? And it was very interesting for us to see with SALT, how we could solve for delight and trust and then get to the data part. So I'll share an example. A lot of people asked us at the time that, why don't you ask people for their bank statements or credit card statements, or ask for SMS reading permissions? And one, those things are not as effective anymore, by the way, thanks to everything that iOS and Android have done. And second, we just didn't want to, right? Because we knew that that's going to instantly cause a lot of fear. And so we said, okay, you know what, let's do like a real life POC with people. And so we set up these WhatsApp chats with our customers, and we used to be like, okay, just pretend I'm a bot. Okay, I'm not a real person, I'm a bot. And just tell me about your day. Tell me about your expenses, where you spent, what you did, how it made you feel, who you spent for. And initially, there was a little bit of hesitation because people were like, but I know you're a person, you're not a bot. But over time, they got used to it, and people would tell us every single thing. They would tell us their salary. So imagine a group of 6 women who've grown up together, known each other since childhood. In a focus group, they're unwilling to talk about how much they earn, but to that bot, which is actually a human being, not even a bot, and they know that, they're okay to share all of those things. They're telling you every single thing about, oh, I bought, a book to give my friend who just went through a breakup, to, oh, I paid for, a colonoscopy, to like things like that. And we were like, interesting. So you have to solve for delight and you have to solve for trust before you solve for automation. And that is why at the time we did the toughest thing, because people thought we were crazy. You're a startup, you're 10 people, you don't even have that much money. Why are you essentially, and this was before ChatGPT, right? So like, why are you building a language model? That is literally the hardest problem you could pick. But we did that, right? And like I said, we trained our model on natural language. We trained our model on like regional colloquial words, because in again in India, right? Like a lot of words, Hindi, English mixed. We trained our model on, cultural context, right? My local grocer versus, Amazon Fresh, so on and so forth, brands and everything. And eventually it reached a place where people could talk to our bot. Like, so my dog's name is Jamun, and Jamun is also a fruit in India, and Jamun is also sweet in India, right? So if I write Jamun 500, the model now knows that I'm actually talking about pet care expenses. But, if someone else wrote Jamun 500, it would probably think, groceries or the sweet, right? And because we won people's trust in this way, the literal next ask from our users were, can you read my bank statements? Can you read my credit card statements, right? And obviously, because we knew how to understand human language, which is literally the toughest thing, it was a breeze for us to read, bank statements, which were like very often, very garbled narrations to credit card statements. But that for us was such an amazing example of use the most sophisticated technology to create the most simple feeling human experiences. And then once you have solved for trust, solve for automation. In fact, you won't even have to, it would have, sort of solved for itself.
Perfect. Thank you. Kelly, how about you? A product that uses AI in Tala.
Yeah, well, I did write down you have to solve for delight and trust before automation. I love that very much. So I think I talked a lot about how we create credit scores. I think I've talked enough about that. I think the other area that we're thinking about right now is fraud. And, we have a lot of fraud models to make sure that we're not lending to those who, have fraudulent motives, but also we want to protect our customers and this segment that we're serving from fraud, right? Like a lot of people have talked about the digital divide, and a lot of that is not just having access to the hardware, it's also the ability to discern between a predatory provider and a good faith provider, like everyone on this call. And so we are developing a LLM, chat GPT type of tool where, people can provide unstructured information to discriminate between, this is a fraudulent app versus not. And those things are just cropping up all the time. It's like whack-a-mole. So that's something that I'm excited about. Something that we're not using, but I think has created a big stir this week. And for those of you who follow Hacker News, it was also on Reddit and elsewhere. And I don't know if this is good or bad. I wanted to just mention it. It's called retail.ai, and it's yes. And so I think it's really interesting. What it does is you plug in your own LLM and it translates it to voice, but in a way that, again, if you go to the site, it's kind of freaky. They have technology that I would say still feels like it's mimicking human interaction. So I think going back to the earlier conversation, human in the loop is so important. But I'm also excited about, customer service agents like at Tala, for example. They are often also our customers. They have such a passion for the space. And if we can sort of use something like that, not to replace them, but to, automate, like we were just talking about, the rote, mundane parts of being customer service, and free them up to almost operate more as financial coaches, right? Invest in them differently also as employees. So I'm like really excited about that. I think there's just a lot more talk about that recently. And sorry, just not to drag this out too much, but again, human in the loop, Viola, others mentioned it. I also want to talk about human in the loop sort of after the fact, right? Like in aggregate, after you've served your customers at scale, making sure that you're generating the kind of like humanity outcomes that you want. So we run surveys, we do a lot of research with external research companies to make sure at the end of the day, people using Tala have built confidence, have better financial health. And we are seeing that particularly with women. So I just want to mention that too, the qualitative research that you can do in parallel is also kind of not human in the loop in the most sort of pure definition, but I think that's something to think about as well.
Perfect. And then, yes,
I was gonna say, I know there's lots of comments about that. Great points, Kelly. There's really good research by Oxfam on community-led savings groups that I went through a few years ago, where they did like longitudinal studies and looked at like how savings and like group loans affected livelihoods and confidence and other things. And I bet you there could be some parallels to the research you're doing. So just small point, but I really like the research they put out.
Okay. Thank you for that, Gordon. Actually, I wanted to address the second question that we have from Antonique to you about more examples of how AI help overcome some of the normative constraints women face. And I know that you have a service, that's quite accessible, and you're talking about, the stickiness of your clients. So you are somehow solving a lot of those constraints. So can you maybe just say how AI has helped Boost Capital really, be able to serve women and overcome those normative constraints?
Yeah, I mean, our business model is it has AI integrated in a few different places on it, because our technology essentially helps customers to apply for loans, savings, financial literacy as a product of ours, insurance product, all through Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp or Telegram. So in order to do that, like, we've got AI that's embedded in facial recognition, in the chat mechanism for back and forth. We've currently got chat in 6 languages that we're operating, and have like 20 to 50,000 customers a day that are like chatting back and forth across all of our bank partners. And there's no way that we could do that without AI embedded in there. So I think that, like, it's in our onboarding stuff, it's in our financial literacy stuff. When somebody goes through and records a 10-second eKYC video, and we're doing facial recognition, matching face to ID card, doing liveness detection, doing anti-fraud detection, all of those are taking advantage. Back to Kelly's point, thank God large companies are using compute in ways that we can use as a VC-funded startup. Like, we use facial recognition that is, engineered by very smart engineers that are on our team, and bolt that into our solution, and then do that for other tools as well. So for ID card reading, OCR, for facial recognition, for chat back and forth, for offering products, there's a lot that can be done using compute power and analysis that others have done, and we found good success with that. I continue to think that, like, just having tools that exist beyond banking hours is a huge win. And then if you think about the constraints to, like, a women-led business, or an applicant that has home responsibilities, having it open 24 hours and being able to chat anytime, anywhere is a game changer. So Tala's business exists for that, for somebody to apply for a loan very, very rapidly. Our business sort of supports banks and financial services to be able to do that anytime and anywhere. So I think that there's some really great use cases for how technology has, like, allowed for more of that. We are very study oriented as well, and have, like, internal research that's focused on this, because we do also want to make sure that the impact is high on the target populations that we're looking to work with. And so I think that the results are good, that there is very positive impact on access, on financial literacy, and then on other key metrics.
Perfect. There's a question from Gisela from ADB. So in a market like Pakistan, where financial access to women is very limited, and particularly mostly via MFIs, and digital access is also very limited, especially for women in the rural regions, and there are regulatory constraints that there are regulatory constraints in place for MFIs actually to access alternative data from credit bureaus. So there's a lot of challenges. How can AI help boost women's access to finance? Who's willing to raise a hand and maybe take that? Yes, Viola.
I'll start with a really powerful example of how AI helped protect women in Cameroon. In majority of Muslim Africa and certain groups, polygamy is a normal thing. AI came in very, very handy when a customer would complete an application for a transaction. You'll notice I don't say loan. We never did any lending. We were buying and selling products. This was basically Islamic finance, is what we were doing. Our questioning the sentiments behind it, the ability to triangulate where people were spending hours between 8 a.m. and 5 a.m. came together to let us know if the asset being proffered for a transaction belonged to wife number 1 or wife number 2, or even number 3. This became so important because if there was a default in a transaction, if you go to a Western style court in Cameroon, if it is the assets of wife number 2 that were used, you cannot enforce against it. That marriage took place in the village. Our AI could know that. Our AI was also able to tell us this because if the phone was between those hours, 2 nights of a week and exactly the same another couple of nights somewhere else, then when you anticipate foreclosure, knowing what the solution was going to be, our AI was able to give us roadmaps that was very accurate. It was also able to tell us things like this person spends a lot of time near the geographic locations of a gambling house. All of these things that we were able to blend together. So it helped us when women are in regions where they are not encouraged or allowed to sign contracts, to be able to do things such as, we're going to buy the goods for you. We understand the speed and rotation of your goods. There is nothing wrong with you buying and selling things. And we can do it in such a way that as we maintain ownership of these goods, they're never technically yours. So being able to read between the lines and understand the nuance of how these things apply gave us such a boost, excuse the pun, in helping women to just continue to have ownership of assets, both at the beginning of transactions and at the very end. And that really did contribute to their savings, greater profit margins because of the way we would mark goods up. And AI was instrumental in that because we needed to understand the behavior of inventory and assets. So that was one way. I hope that is clear, makes sense.
Perfect. Thank you. If anyone wants to add to that, please do so. Otherwise, I'm actually going to jump to a question from Tessa from the Alliance team. And she's curious if any of you have actually used AI and machine learning to help sex disaggregate data and or to further segment data in order to be able to then automate programs after that. So can anyone maybe raise a hand on that? Have you ever used it? Yes.
Yeah, we as a result of working in sort of like Southeast Asia, where there is a heavy influence of like development partners, think World Bank, Asian Development Bank, others. We started out doing all of our data sex disaggregated data for all of our partners, and we're able to, as new customers are flowing through the system for all of our products, for loan products, for savings products, for financial literacy, we're able to track sex disaggregated data and then give that back to our partners in a secured way so that they can make decisions. Lots of our partners make decisions on products for that, so they can kind of see drop-offs of funnel and other interesting sort of insights from data that's there on segments. And I think that like best case scenario, that if your data set is set up that way, there are good insights that come out of it. So we do have that set up, and I'd say there is research that is there for our bank partners and fintech partners that is very useful to see kind of like what the trends are, what the patterns are across a number of different variables. So yes, absolutely.
And the accuracy level of that segmentation, that disaggregation, is it good?
Oh, good question. We played around with it a little bit in the beginning. So like as customers come in through social media, usually we first like operated in Facebook Messenger and then blended out to other like high use platforms that were chat platforms. Facebook has like, you can pull gender from that. We found that was often not correct because people will buy secondhand phones and like their Facebook profile will be set up by like the person that sold them the phone. And so we then stopped using that as the indicator and instead used to pull off the ID card. So like as a customer goes through our system, they answer various questions and then there's an ID card upload where our secure technology sits on top of the platform. And so from there, we're able to pull off ID from gender from ID and then run it from there. So yeah, I think I would say high percentage that we've got like that correct, and then different partners use it in different ways for insight generation.
Well, thank you for that, Gordon. And I think with that, we're going to have to end the session today. Thank you to my amazing panel of speakers. What I got from the session today is while AI, well, seems to be a great technologically, advanced technology that's going to help us really solve a lot of the problems. Is it the solution we've been waiting for all these years to really solve the financial inclusion crisis? Well, it's definitely a step towards it. It is not the only solution. We talked about how human element is still very much important in all of the equation. And so I think it's always going to remain a phygital relationship with both the physical human, just as important as the digital technology that's going to be supporting us in that advance. Thank you to the audience for staying and for asking your questions. And then I wish you all a wonderful afternoon or day ahead. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure to be with you all.
Thanks for having us.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.